Hi, that's me, Rachel Klein, when I was a wee teenager. And this is a little talk for some students. I'm sorry about the eye line. This is a little talk about craft for some students at SUNY Adirondack. Hopefully by now you've read my short story or memoir essay thing, The Dark Room. And so you have a little sense of what the impetus was for writing my novel, The Question Authority. And before I go a second further down that line, I'm going to explain the title because it's a question a lot of people ask me, and even though it's in the book, it's easy to miss, I guess. So back in the day, as on the cover of the book, there's a button that says Question Authority, and people would wear it to mean, don't just sheepishly accept everything you're told, question the figures of authority. I'm sorry about the shaking also. My 7th grade teacher, Robert Roosh, used to wear this button, and as a child, I didn't understand that question was a verb. I thought it meant that he thought he was the authority on all questions, which was in character with the guy. He was the authority on everything. So in my mind, it was the question authority, like the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which growing up in New York was familiar to me. Okay, so I have this idea that I want to write a novel about having had a sexually abusive teacher in grade school and about the best friend from that time that I lost touch with, and about the impact that all this has had on me over the years, because it really has always sort of felt unresolved and distorting and confusing. And I didn't want to write a memoir about me, and my problems and my family and all that. I wanted to explore sort of more of the cultural fabric that made it possible for these things to happen. And that was part of why the whole thing was so insidious. Like, why, where were the parents? Where were the grown-ups? How did this possibly happen in plain sight? But it happened all the time, as we now know in the last few years. So anyway, what did I have to do to turn this story about one day my teacher felt me up in the dark room into a novel that was going to open that world up for other people? And there are a couple things right off the bat. One was I felt, bring the story into the present somehow. Look at the impact on the grown person, and in fact, on the whole, her whole life. And to do that, it had to have some, current importance. And I tried a lot of different ways to do that, but they all felt cheesy and corny, to have her encounter him again on the street or something. Or, I had one where she worked at the call center for the school system, and, one day she recognizes his voice and realizes he's still working in the public schools. But it was very artificial. There was no way beyond that for her to sort of leap through the phone line and address it in any way. So somehow or another, after many contortions, I realized that I could give her a job in the present that dealt with pedophiles in the school system and settling lawsuits with them. And that having Beth, her former best friend, show up in that realm it's a coincidence, but it's a coincidence that sort of makes sense in the context of women who've suffered abuse. The sort of Stockholm syndrome of identifying with the abuser, or just the need to take power in the realm in which you were harmed. To become a lawyer and to fight in that area would make a lot of sense as a way to take care of yourself. And that's what Nora doesn't know about Beth when they first reconnect. The other thing that has to happen is there has to be change over time. There has to be character development. And I puzzled a lot about how do you talk about that? Because I think the thing I'm always afraid of is that if a character's really realistic, they're not consistent the way, so it's like they might early in the story say one thing and later in the story say something contradictory, just the way people do that in real life all the time, like, from 1 hour to the next, depending on who they're talking to and what context they're talking in. But I went back, I went to film school. And I had a screenwriting teacher named Frank Daniel from Czechoslovakia who had been brought up, gone to school in this certain Eastern European realm, not, obviously realm, but way of attacking storytelling. And one of the things that he had always said that really, well, he said a lot of things that stuck with me, but one of them was a story walks on 2 legs, new action and new information, which means that in order for a character to choose to do something new, they need to have gotten a reason to do something new. Something new has to come in, new information. And in order for new information to come in, the character has to do something to the world that brings in the information. This is obvious in like a police procedural, which in many ways this book kind of is, because her job as an investigator, as a settler of lawsuits, is to dig. So that helped me a lot, and I have notes here that I'm now scrolling through. And the other thing that he used to talk about was the definition of suspense, which is hope versus fear. I hope this is going to be the outcome, but I'm afraid that's going to be the outcome. And that the tension, that you sort of tease up the hope and then tease up the fear. And then, if you keep those two things in play, that you're going to have a story that is satisfying to read. So how is that working in my book? Or am I just pretending that I know stuff, which is entirely possible? I think it's that we hope that Nora's going to not settle the lawsuit with the presumably pedophilic teacher in the present. She's told to, but we hope that she'll find a way out of that sort of somewhat Kafkaesque task. But we fear that she's perhaps too damaged to get out of her own way. I think we also hope that she and Beth will find a way to reconnect in the present, because they genuinely miss each other, and they both sort of they're both a little bit of a missing piece for one another, because you don't usually just completely fall out with your best friend in that radical a way, especially if they've sought your help later in life, and if you've constantly thought of them and wondered where they were and what happened to them. So we hope that they will reconnect, but we fear, again, that what has happened to both of them is too much of a rift and an injury to allow that. Looking through my notes again. I think I'm going to leave that there for now. Um, yeah, and maybe add a piece later if I think of one.